I don't know how you and your plants are adjusting to the hot temperatures and the hot weather of the summer, but there's one insect that I can tell you that loves the hot summers, and that's the spider mite. And this year, we've really had a terrible infestation of spider mites here at the studio gardens, and I want to tell you a little bit more about them so maybe you can identify some of the same problems in your garden and landscape. Now, the spider mite is really not an insect. It's more closely related to spiders and ticks. And it feeds on plants by sucking mouth parts, so it actually sucks out the plant juices, and that's really what causes the symptomology, which we'll talk about in a little bit later on the segment. The insect is actually about less than 5 millimeters in length, and so it's really hard to see them. It looks like dust specks, although you can see them with the naked eye, but you can't really see the specific characteristics of them without using a hand lens. Now, I have a slide here to show you what a spider mite actually looks like. You'll see different shades of green, yellow, sometimes red, and they'll have spots on them, and there's many, many different species of the spider mite. They kind of have an oval-shaped body covered with long hairs, and then they've got several sets of legs on them. Now, the interesting thing about spider mites and what makes them such a terrible pest in the landscape and garden is the fact that one female can lay, a minimum of 200 eggs depending on the species again. And the interesting thing is that those eggs will hatch in about 3 days, and then they go through several stages or instar stages of development before they reach the mature level and mature adult stage, and that can occur in 5 days depending on the species. So you can see how easy it is for them to build up in population. Now, the spider mites love hot, dry weather. And again, the way to identify them is to look for the symptoms. And here is an example of some things that we're having them show up on in the garden. This is the butterfly bush, or Buddleia, and if you look at it, it looks speckled from the top side of the foliage, and then as it matures, it turns necrotic, which is a brown spots. Spider mites are usually found on the underneath sides of the leaves, and if you look closely, you'll see it almost has a dirty appearance and some black specks like dust on them. And then you'll see little specks that can move depending on the stage of growth on them. Now, one way to check to make sure, again, we said it's kind of hard to see. You can use different types of hand lenses. This is one that's used for reading, but it serves the same purpose. You can even purchase some that have different magnification to help you in identifying and seeing the spider mites. But of course, we've showed this before on the program. Just use a white sheet of paper, and you can even draw circles on it if you'd like to watch them crawl. But you would take your plant specimen and you would tap it on the white paper, and you would want to make sure the bottom side is facing the paper. And then if you'll look, you'll see it looks like dust specks, and if you'll just watch them for a while and they start to crawl, then you know you've got spider mites. And if you combine that with the fact that there are specks on the plant, chances are you've got the bad guy. Now remember, with all the species of spider mites, there are also good ones, some that feed on organic matter, some that feed on other insects, but ones like the two-spotted spider mite are the ones that are usually most common in the landscape, causing problems. Now, just to show you some other things that they can show up on, here are roses. They love roses, and we've got a couple of examples, again, where the speckling on the top, and then when you turn them over, you see more of the dirty specks like we talked about, and bleaching. This is bishop's weed or gout weed, or just a ground cover that we have in our perennial garden. It was covered with them earlier on with the yellow speckling, and as it gets more severe, it just turns more necrotic, and it will actually kill the plant. We have it on tomatoes. And this is one where people get confused sometimes. It will almost look like a nutrient deficiency, and it could be, because here we have green veins and yellowing in between, but once you turn it over and look a little bit more closely, you will see a few spider mites on it. Bean plants in the vegetable garden, again, yellowing on the top, turn it over, you see the dirty characteristics. We've even had it on daylilies. You can get them on fruit trees. Just about everything is almost susceptible to it. And it's ironic, we have marigolds in the garden this year, and they're not bothered that much, and we have them on more problems on other plants. Now, beside me here is eggplant. And with the eggplant, here's a leaf here. We've got several spider mites congregating around the edge. and is causing some problems. But another insect on the vegetable eggplant that causes some of the same symptoms, the speckling on the tops of the leaves, are called lace bugs. And if you look, you can see the adult stages here, some of the various other stages congregated, and it almost looks black sooty on the foliage. And they feed on the top and the bottom, both cases, where spider mites are usually going to be more on the underneath sides. And again, it's just peppered effect with the high population of lace bugs. So we've got a combination of both on this particular plant. Now, when you're treating for spider mites or lace bugs, remember that you need to be specific, because the insects have different habits as far as their lifestyle and how they feed on the plant. But you've got to be very observant, because this time of year the populations are so high it's hard to use a lot of the organic practices. Things like water pressure sprays, just by spraying water underneath sides for the spider mites. They don't like a lot of water, so that will wash them off and drown them. Using the soaps and oils that we've talked about on the show before. Other things would be kelthane, diazinon, malathion, dimethoate, neem, avid, orthene, pentec, and vindex. So there's a wide choice of things for spider mites. The problems are that you need to rotate some of them and be very regular on spraying, because again, if they can reach maturity and hatch eggs out in 3 to 5 days, they can get a head start on you, which happens in many cases. Now, if you need more information about trying to identify pests and find out controls, you can refer to a couple of fact sheets from your county extension office. 7313 is one for home garden insect control, and 7306 is for ornamental and lawn pest control. And you'll see a lot of the basic things given here, but as a last resort, read that label, because some of the products I mentioned are only used on ornamentals and cannot be used on vegetables. So you've really got to follow the directions. And again, start early, because they overwinter under the leaves and the debris sometimes in your garden. And this year they got a head start on us with that cold, wet spring that we had, and a lot earlier than we expected. And before we knew it, the populations were really high to fight back. So check your resources and be active in that garden and look for those pest problems.